Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to Good Measure. My name is David, and I'll be your host today. Today we have Stephanie Wong, Head Developer of Engagement at Google Cloud, and she's here today to talk with us about cloud technologies, Google, and podcasting. Stephanie, thank you for being here with us today. Do you mind quickly introducing yourself to those in the audience who may not be familiar with you and your work?
Yeah, sure, David. Thanks so much for inviting me onto your podcast. It's an honor to be here. So, as you said, I'm the head of developer engagement here at Google Cloud, and I have been doing this for about a year, a little bit more than that. And I've been in developer relations as a developer advocate as well. If you don't know what that means, it means that I lead up efforts to create inspiring content for developers about all of our products, especially our product launches that come out very frequently throughout the year. So I help contextualize the launches about for developers in the context of what they care about. So that means that I've also created over 400 pieces of content. That means videos, podcasts, blog posts, tutorials, code labs, anything that you might see online as a format for developers to learn about the cloud.
Mm-hmm. And so what you've done in the past at Google for this last year in 2021 was so astounding. And so how has been taking charge and leading the development of Google Cloud's first developer engagement role been like? And what are some of the sort of like highlights that you think are really great about this job?
Well, it's been a challenge. It was started as an undefined, as you said, a new role, very ambiguous. And how it started was that I have been working with different cross-functional groups at the company for many years. So I frequently interact with marketing, developer relations, engineering, product management, and I've been asked to essentially create a role and a position that helps marketing translate some of the product launches for developers, because developers make up over 15% of most companies, if not more, in the newer startup ecosystem. And so they are predominantly becoming an important customer base for cloud. I mean, especially for cloud, because the users of cloud are ultimately going to be developers, engineers, data scientists, and decision makers will often land in their hands. So, how do we talk about Google Cloud products, not just for the business side of things, which is also important, but for the folks that are going to be the ones with their hands on the keyboard, because they will be the users of the product at the end of the day. So I had to figure out a way to learn concepts very quickly, because as you know, we have hundreds of products in Google Cloud, and translate and distill those concepts so I can talk about them and teach developers what they need to know and why they should even care about the launch.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about launches, and so I was wondering, in your article on the top 5 Google Cloud launches as of August of 2021, you talk about AI, data analytics, and a lot more. And so what kind of technologies do you think that Google releases to the cloud will have the biggest impact on the everyday person? And which of the top 5 do you think has made the biggest impact so far?
So I'm sure a lot of people have talked about this concept and product already, but I think artificial intelligence and analytics, Vertex AI from Google Cloud is going to be the one with the biggest impact on the everyday person beyond just developers, but just consumers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Companies are lining up to implement better analytic and AI strategies into their practices, whether it's automating supply chains through image classification, doing predictive maintenance on agricultural farms using AI to know when parts are going down, or even knowing when small mechanical parts on a conveyor belt are defected by also using image classification.
Yeah.
There's even use cases like using cameras in consumer packaged good warehouses to find and replace low stocked items.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these are really to save on time and labor, and that's going to make their way into producing better consumer packaged goods, more reliable cars, devices, and products. And it's going to make its way into all industries like healthcare and biotech to help develop pharmaceuticals faster. One example I can tell you is from DeepMind at Google, which is Google's research arm. They've developed a AI model called AlphaFold, which is a breakthrough in protein folding. And so this has been a huge challenge for the past 50 years in the medical industry. And so it's fundamentally changing how we do biological research so that we can have more precise work on drug development. And it will also complement existing methods to find these treatments faster. And so that's going to impact people. But even in your phones, like Google Pixels or iPhones, I mean, AI is being used to enhance photos, and it powers Google Photo Search. So you can use natural language to find photos, like searching dogs. It's used in Google Maps to improve search results. It's also improving Google Translate, Google Search, image searches using Google Lens, and Apple uses it for Face ID, for example.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, not every single problem needs to be solved by artificial intelligence,
Mhm.
but companies moving forward need to have a data first approach because it can completely disrupt an industry and change lives as it already has. We
Mhm.
know that better data collection, better data cleansing analytics unlocks new pattern recognition so
Yeah.
companies can find solutions to opportunities that they didn't even know existed. So, to answer your question, I think out of those top five that I listed in the article, I
Mhm.
put Vertex AI as the top one
Yeah.
because I do believe that it's the one that has had the largest impact so far since
Mhm.
last year. Um, if you don't know what it is, it's essentially a one single tool in which data scientists can train and compare models using either our pre-existing AI ML models, or you can use your own custom code and deploy it onto Vertex AI. And all of your models are stored in this one central repository. And then you can also deploy the endpoints for prediction. So it really just lowers the barrier to entry for students and for companies without so much expertise in the area, so that you can have a much easier experience to get started with AI.
Mhm. And so, speaking about disruptive technologies, as someone who makes a lot of content about the Google Cloud, and Google has recently formed an actual Web3 team to work on this new technology. And so, what are your thoughts on this, and and the future that has in technology?
Yeah, so this is like unopening a can of worms because Web3 is such a interesting space, and I'm by no means I'm not an authoritative source on this topic, but I will say that it really has changed the world, and I do think it has the future to change the world as well. But I will say, proceed with caution.
Mhm.
It's taken the world by storm for very good reason. And from a developer standpoint, Web3 allows developers to create dApps and smart contracting, and it allows you to contribute to community based projects,
Mhm.
like an NFT project to
Yeah.
support work that you care about or an artist that you care about.
Mhm.
And I think this has just been a continuation of the growth of what we're used to in the industry, like open source software. In decentralized web, no single person or entity or organization can privatize the data, and everything is visible to the public. And I think people really feel this sense of reward when you're contributing to something you care about in a community.
Mhm.
But I will say my opinion on the whole matter is, I say proceed with caution because I think what's happened in the last couple of years is there's a promise of decentralization, but I don't know if it really matches that quite exactly as people envisioned it to. One of my favorite business writers,
Mhm.
Scott Galloway, talks about how you know we advertise the decentralization of power out of the hands of a few big tech companies, but there really has been more centralization of power in
Mhm.
Web3
Yeah.
than we like to admit. For example, the top 9% of crypto accounts holds about 80% of the $41 billion market value of NFTs
Yeah.
on Ethereum. And then, this kind of is like a gatekeeping thing, and it keeps the bulk of the profits for NFTs in a very, very small circle of people with a lot of money and power. And Bitcoin, even more so, the top 2% of accounts own 95% of the $800 billion supply of Bitcoin. And so
Mhm.
that's 0.1% of miners that are responsible for half of all of the mining output. So it's really centralized
Yeah.
to VCs and companies with money. Even OpenSea, which is the largest NFT marketplace, it's very similar to other exchanges where they are also taking a 2.5% cut of every transaction, and that's kind of similar to Coinbase, which are also big companies. So I think when you think about it, it is decentralized in the utility of these technologies, but when you're
Yeah.
talking about the ownership of assets and the funding of these applications, it still seems to be very centralized to some of these companies too.
Mhm. And of the 400 plus sort of videos, podcasts, tutorials, and other kinds of content that you've made for developers, what is the type of content that you find people looking forward to watching the most? And so, how does this connect to the latest trends and innovations in technology?
Yeah, well, so yeah, I've created a lot of different types of content over the last several years and have learned so much in the making of that content about Google Cloud and other tech. I think that the ones that are the best performing content are the ones that are educational and informative, but also very entertaining and engaging. Typically, in the tech industry, when you learn new tools, you might start with a white paper or research or documentation to start getting a little bit more in depth on the topic, which is great because there's a time and a place for this kind of material. But I think in the explosion of video content as a medium, even developers want to be delighted. Developers and engineers are people too, and they want to be inspired by the content that they are learning from. And videos are becoming a very primary source of education for everyone.
Mhm.
So my goal is to talk about AI, talk about compute engine or VMs or networking, but make it really engaging and add a storyline into it. Because if Disney can do that, why can't tech do that for our audience? And so I've played around with animated videos, voiceovers, comics, even on my team, people have done creating videos that really make great use of props or
Mhm.
great use of kind of live footage that I take at the office, kind of giving you an inside look at how things work.
Mhm. And so going back to what you said earlier and about how you sort of have learned a lot over the past year, so how do you exactly educate yourself on the sort of wide variety of topics that you talk about, and how do you sort of crunch it down and make it so digestible for your audience?
Yeah, I think staying in a learner's mind is a phrase that we commonly hear, but in order to become a good learner, it's all about practicing that muscle, right? Like being able to pick up concepts very quickly is going to be difficult in the beginning of any new industry that you're a part of. When
Yeah.
I transitioned into cloud, I knew absolutely nothing. And so it took me a long time to pick up these concepts because I had to learn how systems interacted with one another. I had to pick up basic programming. I had to pick up, what a virtual machine is and the history of virtualization over the last 2 decades. Like, so it's just understanding the history of how computers have evolved and then where we are at today was even helpful for me. And
Yeah.
so I think just understanding that everyone starts somewhere and you need to really exercise that part of your brain to pick up these concepts quickly, because once you have a fundamental knowledge of the landscape, it's a much easier to pick up incremental concepts from there. So once I understood, okay, what SaaS is compared to platform as a service, compared to infrastructure as a service, and I understood the history of computing until cloud computing, and now I understand what Web3 is, I can start just adding incremental knowledge because I already have a foundation. So
Mhm.
I would say the best way to learn is to practice that muscle and also teach others, so
Yeah.
that almost like teach them as if they are 10 years old, right? I think
Mhm.
if you understand a concept truly, then you're able to really boil it down.
Yeah. And so, as an engineer of learning materials, and so, what are some of the most important things that you think a wannabe engineer should learn about when working on cloud technologies?
Well, I was definitely in those shoes of wanting to break into the industry as well. And so I think that understanding, I think programming is an easy entry point, and just taking some classes there. But I think more so understanding how applications that you use every day are built.
Hmm.
You don't have to start with how Uber is built, but maybe start with a simple example, like asking the questions of how would you host a static website in the cloud?
Hmm.
Well, you would need a computer for it to run on, you would need storage, and in order for it to talk to other systems and to you, you would need networking and you would need an interface. So just basic things like that, like, okay, would you host it in a database and how would that interact with the computer?
Hmm.
So maybe from there, you would graduate to figuring out how someone built something a little bit more complex like Wordle. Where is Wordle hosted today? And then you can start to add in more elements to figure out how Uber scales to millions of interactions, I'm sure millions per day, right? And how are they able to scale during really high traffic events? Or how can a website hosted on Shopify scale
Mhm.
during a really high traffic event like Cyber Monday?
Yeah.
So thinking about those questions and starting to ask yourself, I think just starting with that basic question and problem and solution mindset is a great starting point.
Mhm. And so I also have this question. So, as an interviewer, what is it like to interview so many cool people on the behalf of Google, such as Mario Kachibara of Quantum Metric? And how do you actually work around the nerves of being on the camera and just presenting all this information that might have been new to you a while ago?
Yeah, it's been a big learning process. I was much more nervous, even just 3 years ago when I first started getting more experienced in this area. A lot of people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, this must be very natural to you because you seem good at it." And I'm like, "No, being on camera and um, talking the talk and walking the walk isn't natural to a lot of people. It takes a lot of practice
Mhm.
because not only are you presenting information, but you need to know what you're talking about, especially when you're asking executives at these other companies. You don't want to ask them a question and not really understand the concepts that you're actually talking about. So just doing it a lot of times, practicing in front of other people and knowing a little bit of background about that person is very helpful. You never want to walk into a room and know nothing about the person you're speaking with. Just like what you did today, David. You looked me up, you did research, you knew a lot about my background and what Google Cloud is doing in this space today.
Mhm.
So having that preparation is everything.
Yeah.
If you don't speak perfectly, that's fine. You'll build that over time and you'll build your own authentic voice. But doing the legwork to learn about a person and what they're doing is key.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, as a developer and engagement engineer, so what exactly is actually a successful day for you, and how do you sort of manage your time, and what is important to maintain a good balance between your work and just the time that you spend outside of it?
A successful day for me is making progress in creating content. Of course, I want to have an output of a lot of content that helps developers. And I also love building communities online.
Hmm.
So, interacting with my followers, answering their questions, inviting them onto Twitter spaces. So, it's not just a one way street.
Hmm.
So just feeling connected with external developers, but also my own team. We're a
Yeah.
really close knit team and we love collaborating with one another on our projects and our content. So as long as I get to help them and vice versa, I think that's a really successful day for me. Um, and what was the second question? Like how am I successful as a
It's
person in this job or
no, like exactly like how do you how do you maintain like a good balance between work and what you do outside of it?
yeah, that's a really good question. I'm lucky in that I really enjoy what I do at work, and I think a lot of people, they're looking for that element in their careers. And so I think having a good balance for me. So I know that hustle culture has been very big lately, but I think after the pandemic, I'm starting to realize that we should dismantle that concept because hustling all the time is just not healthy. And for me, I don't find fulfillment if I'm burnt out, right?
Yeah.
So making sure that I remind myself each morning, am I living life according to my values, which are success and work and recognition, but really it's about my relationships in life. Am I supporting not just my teammates, but am I enjoying my relationships with my family? Am I being present for my relationships with my friends? And am I doing the things I love, like dance and extracurriculars, and impacting the community outside of work?
Yeah.
Those are things that I think at the end of the day, you'll find a lot more fulfilling. Not just a lot more, but equally as fulfilling as what you do at
Yeah.
work. And also for me, exercising and doing something like physical each day is really important for me because it really helps de stress and get myself out of just being in a room, especially because everybody's working from home now.
Mhm. And so in one of your videos, how I got my dream job at Google, you actually spoke about how you felt as if at one point you were progressing in accordance to how everybody around you was doing. And so, what would you say to someone who's watching this and maybe feeling lost and doesn't really know what they want to do in the future and is sort of also riding along that wave?
Yeah, I felt this after school because once I was out of college, you're suddenly in this ambiguous environment where you don't know the next step for yourself. And it's just this wide open world available for you. So
Mhm.
it's scary. But in a way, it's also exciting because no one is expecting you to do any certain thing except maybe your parents, but they don't have the exact answer, right? Like
Yeah.
what exact step you're going to take next. So it's scary, but it's almost freeing at the same time. So what I would say to people is, look, I went through that. I was always hung up on this concept of you have to find your passion. There's one passion in your life, and if you don't find it, then you're going to be sad for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But a lot of people coming out of school don't have a passion yet because they haven't experienced everything that life has to offer. You were
Mm.
just on a set path and you really don't have that many life experiences yet.
Yeah.
So, the best way to find something you're passionate about is to try new things and just add a lot of extra effort into the things you do.
Mhm.
So, for example, during the pandemic, I was like, great, I have a little bit more time. I'm going to start a YouTube channel. And that lasted 5 months and I gave up on it. So, part of me was like, wow, that sucks, but I do it at work anyway. So, it's okay. But
Mhm.
if you try something and you give up on it, that's totally fine. But at least you tried it to see if it'll become your passion. I have friends that pivoted careers multiple times. They quit their jobs at Google and became an interior designer because they loved creating pottery and they loved playing around with LED lights. So they were both using their artistic skills and their engineering skills. And I have other friends who, left tech to be complete full-time YouTubers.
Mhm.
So just there's never one path in life. You can have multiple careers throughout your life. So
Yeah.
never let these stereotypes sway, how you should live your life.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else, any last words you'd like to say? Do you want to plug anything, tell the audience anything?
Oh, well, I just want to say that, yeah, always be your authentic self. If there's anything that's making you hesitant about jumping into tech, don't let that stop you. Connect with me if you're interested. My Twitter and my handles online are Steph R underscore Wong, WONG. And you can find me at stephrwong.com. I'm always open to chatting with people online. So thanks.
All right. Thank you so much.